beta's over, I guess. Guess I can play some old Halo games to keep myself distracted.
The Halo series has been Microsoft's longest running IP for Xbox. With 6 mainline entries, multiple spin-offs, and a fuck ton of other media, Halo is a gaming juggernaut, and Master Chief has not only been the face of the series, but the face of Xbox as a whole. And 20 years later, the franchise is still going strong with the 7th mainline installment, Halo Infinite, coming soon. So with the newest installment on the horizon, what better time is there to go back and look at all the old Halo games to get a quick refresher while ranking them as we do. And warning, spoilers ahead. And starting off with the worst campaign in the franchise, unsurprisingly, Halo 5. Halo 5's campaign is definitely the most hated by the community, and rightfully so. It did so many things wrong. Even before the actual game came out, the marketing was just wrong. The ads made it seem like Master Chief had gone AWOL and abandoned the humans, leaving them to die, with Spartan Locke hunting him down to stop him. But in reality, none of this was in the fucking game. Chief was never a traitor. All he did was go absent without leave.
Negative infinity. I don't like it.
He never betrayed Earth or anything like that. The game sold us on Spartan Locke going out to kill Chief, but all we got was a terribly choreographed fistfight between the two, which Chief ultimately wins.
Cortana's our concern now, sir.
Like hell she is.
Before warping away for nearly 6 missions until Locke and Chief finally meet up again, and this is what happens.
Chief, please, wait.
Damn, really seems like they want to kill each other. Where was this? Where was all this? When did this happen? It didn't. In summary, Locke hunts Chief down for like 3 missions, they punch each other, then Locke gets involved in a war with the Arbiter that nobody knows anything about unless you've read every fucking Halo book in existence, and then they become best buddies. And did you notice anything about the way I presented that summary of the story right there? Did you notice how all I was talking about was Spartan Locke? Yeah, that's because he gets 80% of this game's missions. In all 15 missions that are in Halo 5, 3 of which are literally around a minute long of you just walking around talking to people, you play as Spartan Locke 12 times and as Master Chief 3. The protagonist of the Halo franchise gets sidelined for Spartan Locke, who's boring as fuck and looks like he has a fucking fishbowl on his head. The 3 times you do get to play as Master Chief, it's in some really boring ass missions as he searches for Cortana, who's fucking evil now, cause fuck it, why not? Take a beloved character who had an emotional death in the previous game and completely destroy her character, making her evil now for no fucking reason. Great. And they even found a way to fuck up evil Cortana even harder. Because if this story was focusing on Master Chief, then Cortana as a villain could have been really interesting. Seeing Master Chief struggling to fight somebody that he loves or something like that. And we sort of see that near the end, but it's cut short in favor of having you play the final mission as Locke, who quickly defeats Cortana, who he had no interesting or meaningful relationship with. Great. Good job. You fucked up yet another plot point that could have been interesting. So the story is crap, I just covered that. Maybe the gameplay can save Halo 5. It's crap too. This is by far the worst gameplay in the Halo franchise, because it doesn't even feel like fucking Halo anymore. The movement is way too fucking advanced. A better title for the game would be Halo 5 Advanced Warfare, because that's what the movement feels like. We went from Halo 1 where you can walk, shoot, maybe even drive a vehicle, to Halo 2 where you could dual wield now, oh maybe you could even sprint in Halo Reach, then cut to Halo 5, you can fucking dash in any direction now baby, slide into the action and murder every one of 3 other squad members. How about you float into the air like Jesus when aiming down sights? Maybe you can slam into the ground like a fucking asteroid. No. Stop it. Look, I get what they're trying to do. I'm all for modernizing Halo to make it not feel as outdated compared to other FPSs. I mean, I've gotten used to the sprinting and aiming from Halo Infinite. Those can work. But we don't need all this other dumb BS. We don't need fucking ground pounds. We don't need fucking dashing. That's not Halo anymore. And the worst offense by far, the inclusion that completely destroys level pacing and difficulty, is the fact that you have 3 other brain-dead AI-controlled Spartans with you constantly, making the game bafflingly easy, with these guys being able to take out a bunch of enemies for you, and if you ever get killed, well then they can revive you. Meaning that you never fucking die, making the game feel way shorter than it already is. In fact, I played all of these games on heroic difficulty, and while in the other games there was a nice challenge presented, and I'd get stuck a few times before I'd be able to beat the mission, here in Halo 5, I got stuck once for around 10 minutes on a boss battle. And yeah, Halo 5 actually has boss battles. In fact, Halo 5 has the most boss battles in the franchise, with 7 in total. And when I say 7 boss battles, I mean 1 boss battle, repeated 7 times. That's right, 343's ideas of boss battles is having you fight the same guy over and over again. I don't even know if this counts as a boss battle anymore. I mean, the other Halo games tried to do boss fights, especially Halo 2, which actually had a decent amount. Even if they weren't great, they were at least unique. So yeah, I spent more time talking about Halo 5 than I would have liked, and mainly because of how much stuff this game fucked up. From gameplay to the lack of Master Chief to how badly they destroyed Cortana's character. This campaign is without a doubt dead last on this list and deserves all the hate it gets, unlike the next game on the list, Halo 4. Now, despite its second to last place ranking, I actually really enjoyed Halo 4's campaign, more than most people I think. It has its problems, but I think it tells a great and compelling story between Master Chief and Cortana, and Chief having to deal with Cortana's deteriorating mental health as she slowly dies. Unfortunately, Master Chief and Cortana's story seems to get weirdly sidelined in favor of the Diadact, the game's main villain, who's really fucking boring. And the Prometheans as a whole are really disappointing to me. You fight them in pretty boring looking locations that are just white futuristic looking platforms, and their weapons aren't anything to write home about. In fact, the Suppressor is probably one of the worst Halo ARs in the series, with the drop rate being absolutely horrendous. Although there is some great moments while hunting the Diadact down, like when you're battling ships on this massive car, or murdering everybody on this fucking mech. And the incredible final mission where you're riding your little jet on the Diadact's massive ship while trying to find your way into it, which was pretty clearly inspired by Star Wars. Once you do actually make it into the ship, you're met with a pretty disappointing final boss battle, with Chief and Cortana fighting the Diadact, if it can even count as a boss fight since it's literally just a QuickTime event. But the scene after this boss battle is what really saved this game for me. I know some people really don't like it because Chief shows a lot of emotion, but I love the fact that we get to see Chief's more human side as Cortana dies. An incredible scene that Halo 5 took and completely destroyed. But fuck that game, we already talked about how shit it was. Moving on to the gameplay, it's alright. It's definitely not as bad as it was in Halo 5, but it definitely is more fast-paced than the originals, with sprinting being permanent and not just an upgrade. I do find the gunplay to feel great though, better than in Halo 5's. Although because of the gunplay, it makes the game incredibly easy. It is still harder than Halo 5's, but not by much. I still had barely any trouble, and mostly breezed through the game, which is probably my biggest gripe, the length. This game feels way too short. Everything felt really rushed, with the way the story hopped around with Cortana being the focus, and then the Diadact, and then Cortana again. Overall, Halo 4, it's a good game, but nothing more. I do enjoy it, and I don't think it deserves all the hate it gets, but to me, it has too many problems to beat out the originals.
Okay, so that's 343's Halo games out of the way, and I'm pretty sure that most people will agree with me when I say that those games are at the bottom of the tier list. Now this next game, I'm not sure as many people will agree with. Because the next game on this list is Halo Reach.
Okay, look, I'm not saying that Halo Reach is a bad game. In fact, I fucking love it, and it's one of my favorite FPSs of all time. But to me, all the other Halo games just trump it. It's great, but the other 3 games just beat it by a little bit, and I mostly think it's due to Halo Reach's limitations as a prequel, and the fact that a lot of people, including Bungie, were getting burnt out by Halo by the time Reach came out. But Bungie really did the best they could with their last Halo, because Halo Reach's campaign really should not work as well as it did. A prequel made by a company that didn't want anything to do with the franchise anymore in a trilogy that had been completed, and you play as a group of people that we've never heard of. Yet despite all of that, Halo Reach's campaign is fantastic and by far the most depressing campaign in the franchise. Sure, the original trilogy had its sad moments, but Reach is just fucking depressing. You play as Noble Six with a squad of 5 other Spartans, Carter, George, Kat, Emil, and June, who are all trying to save the planet Reach, which is getting invaded by the Covenant, before the mission changes to delivering Cortana to the Pillar of Autumn at the end of the game. I loved all of these characters, and the game really tries to get you attached to them, and does a pretty good job at it before slowly killing off each of them. With George being the first to go, sacrificing himself to blow up a ship after an awesome and innovative dogfight mission. But George's death is in vain because like 100 more of those same fleeps show up seconds later. Kat is the next to go, getting randomly shot in the back of the head by some elite, which I was not expecting at all with how sudden it was. Carter then gets shot in the back in the final mission before surviving long enough to fly his plane into a Scarab to save Six and Emil, who dies later in the mission while trying to defend Six with an AA gun. These characters' deaths were all delivered amazingly, except for maybe Kat's death, but I think her sudden death was intentional. But the best death out of all of them by far was your main character, Noble Six, who not only is the last one alive out of the team, but the last Spartan alive on the planet. Your objective is to survive, and you have to try to fight off endless hordes of elites that are all hunting you down. This scene was so incredibly done, from all the dead Spartans around you, to your helmet breaking as you get shot, to the depressing music in the background, and no matter what you do, Noble Six will die, getting swarmed and then stabbed by a group of elites. I really loved Halo Reach's campaign, especially the story, but it definitely is not perfect, with my major gripe being its missions. Most of the missions in the game have been done in the original trilogy, and better at that, with the only truly unique one being the dogfight mission. Like I mentioned before, this mission was fantastic, but once you return to Reach, things just slowed down. And while I couldn't put my finger on why I was getting a bit bored with Reach while playing the game, I realized it as I saw Captain Keyes and remembered how he died. It's because the Flood isn't in this game. Now to some that may be a pro, cause I'm sure a lot of people hate these annoying ass zombie motherfuckers with their stupid ass rocket launchers, but what the Flood did in the original trilogy was change up the pace of the game before you could get bored. Notice how in the original trilogy the Flood was introduced at the halfway point in each game. It's to spice things up. Halo Reach doesn't have that, so you'll be fighting the Covenant for the entire game. And that's my biggest issue. Halo Reach is fantastic and probably has the best story, but the original trilogy is just overall better. Starting with the first, Halo Combat Evolved, the one that started it all. Released in 2001 alongside the original Xbox, Halo 1 changed the gaming industry forever, and not only cemented the Xbox as a brand, but cemented the FPS genre on console as a whole. But the game has aged for the worse as time has passed. I'm not talking about the graphics, hell, all of Bungie's games don't look the best now if we're talking about that, but what I am talking about is the gameplay and story. Its gameplay is still great and still feels like the original trilogy, but some things are just outdated today. For starters, the amount of backtracking you'll do near the end of the game is a bit too frequent. Sure, they changed up the locations a bit to try to hide the fact that you're backtracking, but it still seems lazy. Although that doesn't take away from the fact that Halo 1's core level design is absolutely amazing. You're given so much freedom in each level with how you decide to go about it, and considering that this was the first game of the franchise, all of this stuff was very fresh, much more than Reach. And like I mentioned before while talking about Halo Reach, the pace in this one is a lot better, with you fighting the Covenant in the first half of the game, then the Flood in the second, then both in the third, instead of the Covenant the whole way through. In fact, if we're just talking about level design and pacing, I think Halo 1 beats all of the other games except for maybe Halo 3. Its level design is absolutely fantastic, only being hampered by its backtracking. But the biggest issue with Halo 1 for me, and the thing that's stopping it from beating Halo 2 and 3, is its story. I mean, Halo 1's story is good and engaging enough to get you from start to finish, but compared to every other game in the franchise, Halo 1's story feels almost non-existent. I mean, it's not bad by any means, but it just feels like it's more in the background and the gameplay is taking center stage. Even Halo 5 had more of a story than 1. Granted, it wasn't a very good story. In fact, even though Halo 1 doesn't focus on its story that much, I still think it's better than whatever the fuck Halo 5 was. But that's the major thing holding Halo 1 back from its sequels, and the thing that the sequels improve upon, while refining the gameplay and making it an overall better game. Even if it is just slightly better, like in Halo 2's case. Ranking Halo 2 over Halo 1 was such a difficult decision, because the two are so close together in quality. Halo 2 does a lot worse than Halo 1, but at the same time, it does a lot of things better than Halo 1. Like the story, which has an instant jump in quality straight from the get-go. As soon as Halo 2 starts, you can tell it's going to be more story-driven, as we see a lot more of the Covenant than we ever did in the first. In fact, one of the things I love so much about Halo 2 is how much character the Covenant is given. In the first game, they were just goofy aliens that you shoot and kill, but in Halo 2, we get to see their leaders, their structural hierarchy, and the reason they're going to war with the humans. And by far the best part of the Covenant was the introduction of the Arbiter, their own Master Chief. This opening is done incredibly well, and I love the way they mirror Chief and Arbiter, with Chief getting his awards for being victorious and the Arbiter getting punished for being defeated. It's a great way to introduce the character, and when you finally get to play as the Arbiter a few missions later, it gives the Arbiter a mission to redeem himself. And yes, you don't play as Master Chief for the entirety of Halo 2, similar to how you play as Spartan Locke in Halo 5. And if you're expecting me to hate this fact, you're wrong, because Halo 2 handles the two protagonist system so much better than Halo 5. For starters, you actually get to fucking play as Master Chief in Halo 2. Instead of the missions being split 80% Arbiter, 20% Chief like it was in Halo 5, they're split 50-50 here. You play a mission as Chief, then as the Arbiter, then as Chief. This is the perfect way to do it, and it's satisfying seeing the Arbiter finally meet the other characters we love, like Sergeant Johnson, even if the Arbiter beats the shit out of him. And it's after this scene that cements the Arbiter as a fantastic character, unlike Spartan Locke. He gets betrayed and sides with Sergeant Johnson and the humans. Now I've focused a lot on the Arbiter so far, and that's mainly because he honestly really steals the spotlight from Master Chief in this game. But thankfully it's nowhere near as forced as it was in Halo 5, considering that Chief still gets an equal amount of missions. But that's not to say that Master Chief is crap in this game by any means. He still has a bunch of awesome moments, like flying through space on a fucking bomb and blowing up an entire Covenant fleet, or riding a tank for the first time, or invading and taking down a Scarab from the inside. And it helps that the gameplay feels great and even better than the first one, with a new dual-wielding system allowing you to have a lot more creativity with how you take down enemies, and there's a bunch of new types. Specifically the Brutes, who betrayed the Elite near the end of the game and replaced them. I love the way the Brutes are handled in Halo 2. Instead of having regenerating shields like the Elite, they just have a fuck ton of health, which is something I wish Halo 3 did, instead of just turning them into clones of the Elite. But there is one new enemy type in Halo 2 that single-handedly ruins this game and has become the figurehead of bullshit in the Halo franchise. It's the Sniper Jackal. This game has the opposite problem of Halo 4 and 5, where those games were too easy. This one is frustratingly hard. And it's because of these fuckers. These guys are the most irritating things to die to, even on Heroic. They have perfect pinpoint accuracy and will one-shot you constantly. And it's hard to see them too. You'll have to die multiple times before you can figure out their spawns. And while I was exaggerating earlier by saying that they ruined the entire game, they are still annoying as hell. But the one thing that actually really hurts this game for me, and my biggest problem with this game by far, and the reason it's not number one and was almost beaten by Halo 1, is the ending.
This is Spartan 117.
Can anyone hear me? Over.
Isolate that signal. Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.
That is not how you end a game. It is the most unsatisfying ending you could get. Sure, the Arbiter story ends a little bit more satisfyingly, but overall the ending here is just awful. Cliffhanger endings can work, but they have to be satisfying and tie up most loose ends. This leaves so many loose ends untied, and he had to wait 3 years to see it get concluded. Thankfully, Halo 3 was able to capitalize on this ending and give us a satisfying ending. And speaking of which, Halo 3 is the best game in the franchise. Okay, now I'm probably cheating a little bit considering that Halo 3 was the first game I played, so I have the most nostalgia for it. But even without nostalgia, Halo 3 is still the best in the franchise. It did literally everything right, and the things that were bad in the original two games, even with Reach, are fixed here. The lack of enemy variety in Reach isn't a problem since this one has the Flood. The lack of a story in Halo 1 is fixed here because Halo 3's story is fantastic and wraps up the trilogy perfectly, tying up all the loose ends left by Halo 2's crap ending, which is another thing that this game does better, the ending. Even the difficulty has been perfected here. It's not a walk in the park like Halo 4 and 5, but it's not insanely ridiculous like Halo 2. Even the Flood aren't as broken as they were in the first two games, and have been balanced a lot better with you being able to punch them now. The only time I found a level bullshit in Halo 3 was this one. Fuck this entire level, especially these fucking bullshit ass turrets. But the level design too is the best it's ever been other than this one. And if you want a specific proof for how amazing the levels can be, just play the 8th mission in the game, which is without a doubt my favorite mission in the franchise. It is amazing. With a fast start as you drop into a bunch of Covenant forces, moving to a Warthog section with a bunch of turrets and tanks, to an amazing aerial section as you drop onto 2 scarabs and then hop back onto your plane before they explode. And finally, teaming up with the Flood of all things to finally kill the Prophet of Truth, finally giving the Arbiter his revenge. An incredible mission which does a fantastic job of moving the story forward as the two of you go out to destroy the second ring, in a great reference to the ending of Halo 1. This game has no faults that I could think of, and like I mentioned before, every problem that was in Halo 1 and 2 has been remedied here. Halo 3 is the perfect blend of everything I love about Halo. The badass moments, the funny moments, and the depressing moments. And that is why it's by far my favorite Halo of all time.
Alright, well, that's all the Halo games. Guess now I just have to wait. Damn, it's only been 15 seconds. This is gonna take longer than I thought.